Welcome back, and today we'll do one of the many topics in Chapter 14 titled Other C Topics. Now, if you have some time, by all means, go through everything that's in this chapter. I'm sorry, but I am going to talk specifically about section 14.4, using command line arguments, and I'm going to jump there directly. So on many systems, it's possible to pass arguments to the main function. We have seen so far that we can pass arguments to functions within our program, but so far we haven't passed any arguments to the main function. Using command line arguments, we can change that. We can now do that. We haven't done it so far. We'll look at it now. Now, the argument list for the main function that we've used so far was void. We haven't been passing anything to the main function. But there is an alternative. There are two standard arguments you can put in the argument list of main, and they are an integer, argc, and a character pointer, argv. Argc can be read and easily remembered as meaning arguments count. This integer will contain the number of arguments that have been passed to your program when it was launched from the command line. The second parameter argv, can be thought of as meaning argument values. So what the actual arguments are that have been passed to your program at the command line. And this is basically an array of strings which contain the actual command line arguments. And a common use of command line arguments like this is passing some kinds of options to your program. In the example that we will see, those options will be two file names. And this is easily and best understood by an example. What we're going to do is I'm going to show you a program. We're going to call it mycopy, and the compiled program on Linux will be named mycopy or mycopy.o. On Windows, it'll be combined to an executable file with the extension .exe, so mycopy.exe. And this is how we will use this program. So on the command line, so this is the case for Linux, the first line that you see over here. In Linux, you would use it like this: mycopy space, and then you would provide the name of an input file, and space another file name, the name of an output file. And what the copy program will do, it'll copy all the contents of the input file into the output file. In Windows, the syntax is slightly different. You may have to add .exe explicitly at the end of the file name, although that's not always necessary. And after that, it's similar. You have one argument, the name of the input file, the one that you want to copy, and the output file name, the name of the file into which you want to copy the contents of the input file. You could have other arguments after that, but in this program, that's really all that's necessary. So if you execute a program like this, what will be the values received in the arguments argc and argv? Well, argc will contain 3. The name of your program, the executable file, is counted as an argument. So that is argument number 1. Input file name will be argument number 2, and output file name will be argument number 3. So argc, the integer argc, will contain the value 3 for this example. argv contains 3 strings. So argv0 will contain the first string on the command line, my copy or mycopy.exe, depending on what platform you're using. argv1 will contain the string input, or point to the string input. And argv2 will point at a string that's output, the third argument that I gave over here. We are using argv, the second argument, and argv2, the third argument, as arguments to our program. We're using these for input, name of input file, that's to be copied, and name of output file, the name that we want to give our copied file. And we're going to use the fopen function to open files, both input and output files. We're going to read from the input file, character by character, and we're going to write each character into the output file until we get to the end of file indicator in the input file. And then we close the files, and that's the end of the program. And the result will be an exact copy of file input with the name of whatever name we gave to the output file. Now in Visual Studio or Visual C++, depending on what you're using, in Visual Studio these days, we can specify command line arguments while we are debugging the program, while we're still testing it out. And I'll show you how to do that in the hands-on section, but it's generally can right-click on the project name in the Solution Explorer, select Properties, expand Configuration Options, select Debugging, and you can provide command line arguments there. And here's the sample program that I just talked about. So you can see the first change is in the definition of the main function. The argument over here is no longer just the boring void. So we have first argument, standard, has to be argc, the integer argc. Second one is the character pointer to the array of strings. Okay, so the first thing we do is we check if we even received the correct number of command line arguments. Remember, this program cannot do anything unless you provide it an input file name and an output file name. So first thing we check is the number of arguments equal to 3? If it's not, means you made a mistake providing proper arguments. If you have too few, that'll be a problem. If you have too many, you may be misunderstanding how to use this program. And in that case, we just print out this helpful message saying usage, my copy space, input file, in file, out file. Now let's assume that the proper number of arguments have been given. That gets us into the else block. And what we do first is we define a file pointer for the input file. We open the input file for reading. That's argv1, whatever the name of the file given in argv1 is. And if that file is opened successfully, the result should be a value to in file pointer that is not null, which means we can proceed. And the second step is opening the output file. And for that, we inside this if block, we define another file pointer. And we open this file with the file name given as received in argv2. We open this one for writing. Assuming that also happens successfully and out file pointer is not equal to null, we go into this nested if block. and we define an integer c, which will be kind of like a temporary holding area to store the character read from the input file using fgetc, and we read that character from the input file into C, and as long as it's not the end of file, we write that character to the output file. And depending on how large your file is, you'll keep going through this loop a number of times. When you finally reach the end of file in the input file, that gets you out of the while loop, we close the output file. If the output file could not be opened, we have an else block that says file, the name of the output file could not be opened for whatever reason. Maybe you don't have enough space or something on your hard drive, and in that case we just close the and finally we close the input file as well. If the input file could not be opened, we have the corresponding else block for that outer if block, and you print out file, input name file, could not be opened. And that's the end of the program.